Good morning. Got it. I will, this is Eric Cardella, council member. I will go ahead and call to order the YDC Policy Rules and Research Committee subcommittee meeting, called to order at 12:35. Welcome, folks.
Thanks, Eric. Melissa, I have an annotated agenda that I started that you're welcome to jump into, but I can say a few of the things that are in it for our welcome and calling to order portion of the meeting. Thanks everybody for joining us today. My name is Cord Bucher. I'm the Deputy Director of YDD, and I'll start by reminding folks to say, if you can, please say your name when you start speaking. For the record, this is a public meeting, a formal advisory meeting of the state. So if you're a member of the public and wish to comment, there's a public comment section on the agenda at the end of this meeting. And you would have up to 3 minutes to speak. If you would like to make public comment, please let Melissa know. You can send a direct message to her and she'll be tracking who would like to speak. This meeting is being recorded. And I believe, Melissa, now, if you would, please do the roll call.
Will do. Thank you, Cord. Zan Ojero, Eric Cardella.
Here.
Parasa Chanrami.
Here.
Celeste Jansen. Diana Rojas. Liz Thorne. So of note, that's the whole committee, but we do have some other council members here. Thank you, Molly, for joining us, Molly Rogers. And that's it. Thanks.
Is it safe to assume the caller on the phone is a member of the public and not one of our council members? I don't think that you've been able to speak up, but please, if you are a council member, unmute and let us know. With that, I'll jump into the agenda. I actually don't have anything specifically for committee update, but perhaps it would be good to start before I do a lot of talking about our legislative update, to provide members of the committee with an opportunity to share anything that you wanted to mention today, put on our agenda, or otherwise just share for the greater good.
Hey, Cord, can I ask you a quick question? And we probably don't need to, well, we don't need to spend a ton of time on this, but one of the things that just occurred to me, and maybe Commissioner Ojero or others, we did ask committees to develop kind of a, sort of a committee overview, what's the purpose, kind of what are the things. Did this committee do that, Cord? My brain, is not remembering.
I do not recall completing that project, to be honest.
Okay.
I feel like we had a discussion that was kind of ranged around like sort of some of the interests and purpose of the committee, but it didn't result in us developing a sort of charter statement. And I have not picked that back up. So
let's put on the committee update as a to-do.
Yeah, I would just add, that is my recollection as well. This is Eric. I know at our last full council meeting, we did discuss some desire for this committee to add some framework for strategic plan, review and next phase of strategic planning process that this committee could be involved in. But that was I think a idea as opposed to a framework. So I'll be interested to see what we can talk through today. I know that's on the agenda for an update. Could I just ask, I know Commissioner Ojero is our chair. Do we have a co-chair? Has that also been identified? I don't have the committee roster in front of me.
Hi, Eric, this is Cord. Yes, we do. That is Diana, who I believe is also out. So we
couldn't make it today. Okay.
Without chairs today.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I will, perhaps today will give us some ideas on how to sort of generate something. I mean, I think the two things that mostly wanted to have discussions about with the committee today are the YDD statutory updates legislation and how that's progressing and what it would mean if that does make it through the legislature. And of course, strategic planning. And yeah, that I think was one of the things that, it did come up in the last council meeting. And, I think that this feels like of all the committees that is the right place for that sort of work to sort of be, rooted, if it is to sort of be led by a committee, but that's something I hope to kind of talk with folks about today. I am gonna just press this button here. I dropped into the chat to move us to the legislative update. There's links. This kind of formatted a bit weird, but I've got links in here to pages on the legislative website related to House Bill 2372, which is the YDD statutory updates bill. I can't really recall exactly where this was. I think it was more or less not happening when we met with the full council. We put this forward as a legislative concept prior to the new administration coming in. The governor's office was looked at it and essentially said, this is fine, but we're not going to put it forward as a bill from the governor's office, just because there's a very defined legislative agenda coming out of Governor Kotek's administration. This is, technical fix bill is important, but not really aligned with these real specific policy areas that they wanted to address. But we were permitted to talk with legislators about it. And so we took our LC, we had a conversation with Representative Ricky Ruiz, who is somewhat familiar with our work. His district is out in Gresham. He's advocated a lot for the Gresham EMOPI outreach program that got some emergency funding through YDD. So he was interested to hear that we were working on this and sponsored a priority bill, which came after the regular legislative deadline, meaning it was going to go to a rules committee. And the rules committee said, we don't want this shouldn't come to us this way. It should go to a policy committee. And so we found this bill, HB 2372. It was a placeholder bill. In order to put legislation into a bill, it has to be a relating to clause has to match. So the bill was relating to youth, and we felt like that was appropriate for this legislation. We reached out to that committee. OYA had the placeholder and they were not using it, and the committee actually had a hearing scheduled. They, within a couple of days, basically right before the hearing, we were able to get our legislative concept amended into this bill. So that committee didn't get a lot of time to look at it, but they had a public hearing back at the beginning of April. I think it was about probably April 3rd. There was a hearing in the House. We may have sent a last minute email because it did happen really quickly. We notified the council. The bill passed. There was a work session the following day. The one issue that we had encountered was some question around a wording change that we made in the some last amendments we were making to this bill. That issue has essentially been addressed. So the bill is now in Senate. There was a public hearing in Senate Judiciary, excuse me. It's been before the Judiciary committees. May have misspoken before. It was in House Judiciary. It's now at Senate Judiciary. And the public hearing was this week. It was on Tuesday. I testified on the bill. If you want to watch the video of it, the link is there in the chat. The slide deck is also linked in the chat. Both of those things are available on the OLIS website. I'm not going to share this stuff in depth today, but we'll probably send something out to the council, just an update on this. We have a work session scheduled next week. I'm guessing that if that goes smoothly, we'll want to send out an update if it passes its second committee. The issue that came up around wording, there is an amendment, a -3 amendment that in this work session would be incorporated. The only folks who voted against, there were 6 votes in the House against the bill, but there was a vote explanation from one of them saying that if this fix was made, she would support the bill when it went back to the House for concurrence. So if it passes the Senate, it would go back to the House. Since it has this minor change, they have to see it again and vote one more time. And then it would go to the governor's office if it just goes House, Senate, House, and then on up. So we've done our best to try to navigate that issue. Otherwise, I feel really good about the bill and its contents. I'll pause now. Looks like folks may have some comments or questions.
Yeah, Cord, this is Eric. What was the minor change that was discussed?
Yeah, I'm happy to say, or maybe not happy, but yeah, so we were working with, had some conversation with Molly and other folks from the juvenile director side about language in the bill related to the juvenile crime prevention plans. There was a thing that was pointed out that the way the wording was in our original concept, the plan, so the county Board of Commissioners establishes the partnership that is going to create the plan to submit to YDC for approval. And that partnership would carry out the juvenile crime prevention work in a county. And our original language said that the County Board of Commissioners would submit the plan to the council. And the correction that was requested was that rather than the Board of Commissioners submitting the plan, that the partnership would submit the plan, which is what happens in practice. The current law doesn't really get into much detail about how the plan submission and approval process works. So this was something that needed to be tweaked to reflect actual practice. And there was something noted in the course of that conversation about, the need to be really specific about the type of who is doing this within a county. And I had interpreted it as that we wanted to actually think about the fact that there are counties with boards of county commissioners and counties that have a different governing body, a county court. And so the change was something I did in addition in an attempt to be helpful and inclusive, which was to change Board of County Commissioners to county government. There was at one point wording, which ultimately now is the wording that will get put into the bill, which is it needs to say governing body of a county. The concern was that by just saying county government, it wasn't specific enough to the governing authority being the one to make the decision on who the partnership would be, to approve the plan, et cetera. And so that it was really an unintended error, but that ambiguity didn't sit well with one of the representatives on House Committee and Judiciary. And so there was some conversation after the hearing. The Association of Oregon Counties weighed in, and so the wording we have, I think, will satisfy the concerns of the representative and was satisfactory to the counties. And I do think it was well intentioned. I mean, I could see where a county court would say, well, we're not a Board of County Commissioners, although from the perspective of the representative, technically they are. Either as it may, that was the thing that actually was the most contentious around this bill. We had some questions about content, about some of the language that we introduced, which we feel good about, and we're able to provide written responses for. There's a couple of questions we got in the House. We provided a response that's also posted in the testimony on the bill on OLS. But yeah, that was it. It was essentially how we referred to county governing bodies was the issue. I mean, I think that the thing that I would say about this bill and how it could impact strategic planning is, that if this passes, which there's still a long way to go, even if the work session results in its passage, work in the Senate is perhaps slowing down a little bit. I'm not sure about today, but there have been walkouts. There's the possibility that the session gets gummed up here towards the end, and that would cause a logjam, and it would not make its way to the finish line because of that. So that's a little bit of a concern, but if it does, and if it is voted out of the Senate and then the House votes in concurrence and it goes to the governor for signature, then this would update the statutes related to the council and the division pretty significantly. A lot of it is actually just describing the division, but there are some things that are in there that I think will be worth considering when we get to strategic planning. There is language in the bill related to just like the purpose and intent of the council and the division. We've changed some of the language around gang prevention to speak more to youth violence prevention and the approaches we would use to that. There's just, I think, language that while it's subtle, I think it kind of like really improves and clarifies and modernizes how we talk about youth development work in the statute. The other thing that it does is it just makes it a lot easier to understand how the council and the division will work together on grant making. So the council has grant making authority. The council sets the rules on how these things work. We will probably need to do administrative rule updates if this bill passes to get everything aligned. But there's also a piece that we worked with DOJ, as folks may recall. There was some discussion around this sovereign nation fund model and how we might be able to look at that for the future. Can we fund programs to support youth development in tribal nations directly and look at a different model than the competitive grant model currently? And some of the clarifications around the council's ability to determine a grant fund is needed, that would now be incorporated into statute, would make it a clear path for essentially the council to be able to say, we want to create a grant fund to do X, and we direct the division to carry this out. And so that was something that we saw, when we were working on the final language to go into the original amendment of this bill, checked in with DOJ, and we said, can we look this over and make sure that we have maximum flexibility for the council to make decisions around funding priorities, and also that it's clear that the council will determine the strategy, the process, but the division can administer grants and will carry out the work. And additionally, one other thing we did was when an issue comes up where the legislature gives money to the division, which has happened in the last couple of years, we were just given money to make grants. In one case, the legislation was not clear. The money was given to ODE, and in the case of the funds for Gresham. And so we actually had to go to ODE and to DOJ and say, can we please do what the legislature asked us to do, because the bill doesn't say it. And so it will essentially permit the YDD, when we are given money, we can administer grants. Right now, the YDD doesn't really have a statutory authority to do anything beyond what the council delegates, which has sort of fallen behind the times in terms of the actual scope of work that we have. So that's I think all that I wanted to say about the legislation. If folks have looked at it, if you have questions about it, I'd be very happy to talk about it.
Thank you for the update, Cord. I just wanted to say that. And the other thing I'm thinking about is in the interim, as I'm reflecting on how much turnover there's been in the legislature, and how there'll be, a lot of folks moving on to different roles at the agency level and department level as well. I wonder if there's something we can think about in the interim as we build stronger relationships with folks on the different committees where we're finding a lot of our different bills, especially because I feel like on the education side, there was a lot of confusion at times with all the new lawmakers and really understanding their role and their scope of work in a particular policy issue area. So just something to think about for us in the long run, and once session is over, right? What are some ways in which we as members of the council can help support you and the YDD team in connecting? That's just something I've been reflecting on a lot, especially with everything that's happened so far this session.
Thanks, Parasa, for that question. I mean, I think that one of the things that, so I noticed when I don't, maybe this actually also happened since the last committee meeting, and I didn't think about this for the update, but earlier in the session, Brian testified to Joint Ways and Means on our budget. And one of the subjects that seemed to get a lot of interest from that committee was just on youth disconnection and the data around who are we talking about? Where are youth not finishing school? Where are youth kind of falling into this category of not connected to school and work? And we shared a lot of data in our follow-up with the committee. But I think that it was one of those things where I think, one, there's an opportunity to this is an issue that legislators are like, oh, wow, this is going on, and I want to know more about this. In many cases, they kind of want to know if it's happening in their district or what is happening in their district. So I think something we did in 2016 that may be worth looking at again was actually creating some policy documents that we shared with the legislators we did more issue-specific policy briefs. So we did one on youth disconnection, we did one on youth experiencing homelessness, I think we did one on LGBTQ plus youth, we did one on graduation rates and non-completion. So just different areas of focus. I think it was probably, in session, a lot of paper hits desks, and I don't know how much these things had an impact, but I think in a few cases, legislators were like, oh, this was really interesting. This was actually really helpful. So I think trying to highlight the policy issues we think are important from our work is one thing, but I also feel like something we've not done much that would be really interesting would be finding ways to connect legislators with the programs we fund in their districts. Because I also usually will, before going into a hearing, like I had in my notes on Tuesday, a program or two in every district of the folks on that Judiciary Committee, just in case, somehow a question led to an opportunity to mention Klamath Works or to mention what Catholic Charities or Mano a Mano or whoever is doing, and I don't have the level of grant knowledge I used to, but I feel like legislators are often really surprised and excited to hear about the things that YDC grant making is doing in their community. But I think seeing it would be a different thing. And I don't know the logistics of that. But I think that if for a council member, if there's a legislative relationship and we could find a way to turn that into an opportunity for a legislator to see the work, that also feels like it could be really powerful, because I think that would build champions in a different way from just saying here's the data and the need that data demonstrates.
Yeah, I like that opportunity to bring lawmakers out with us to perhaps do a tour or smaller visits with some of the grantees, right? That could be an opportunity just to help people really deepen their understanding of the different challenges our youth are facing. Maybe even spending some time with youth members from the council potentially, because I feel like it's different when people experience it in that way. It's not just like words on a paper, it's very experiential. There's something that sticks with folks differently. So yeah, just something for us to think about. Again, not during session. Once session is over.
I think that we'll be this fall. We'll have a whole new slate of grants being awarded, and so there's a big opportunity to just as that is rolling out, to highlight like, hey, like here's the new 2023-25 investments, and then as we're starting to see the lay of the land in terms of what we've got going on grant wise, then I think that's an opportunity to look at, okay, like who might have something going on that we could try to it might be hard to do it before the short session. Grants are just starting up in the fall. There may or may not be enough happening or enough runway to put something together, but probably in the spring and summer of 2024, I think that could be a real, maybe this is something to look at in the strategic plan around an advocacy strategy, is like, can we in the summers after short session make it our practice to find out how can we like connect the highlighted programs doing great work with legislators who would be really interested in seeing it in their district.
Yeah, I think that would be great, and I think you're spot on in terms of your assessment of timing too. It probably makes more sense after the short session.
The last thing I'll maybe note about the legislative update is there were a bunch of bills that we talked about in our last meeting. I believe the Juvenile Justice Advisory Commission bill is still alive. Molly, can you confirm that? I haven't honestly been following it closely in the last couple of weeks. It did make it over to the Senate.
It made it over to the Senate, and I think that's where it's standing and sitting at this moment in time. So the answer is it was moving. I don't know now.
That's kind of what I thought. The other one that I think I probably should mention is SB, I think it's 421, right? Yes, the Youth Advisory Council bill. I know that it's over in Ways and Means now, but I don't actually know what's happening there. I haven't followed. Paras, do you want to provide an update on that?
Yeah, it's in, like you said, Court, it's in Ways and Means. Our understanding is that folks are kind of waiting on pins and needles until the May revenue forecast comes out to see how much additional revenue is available. And from what we've been hearing, it sounds like, depending on that outlook, budgets will move fairly quickly, especially like the larger ticket items. But I know for stuff like the Youth Collaborative Council and others, or workforce, oftentimes lawmakers and leadership will wait till the very end to see actually exactly how much funding is left over, to see if there's any funding for the smaller ticket items. So it's really hard to tell if they're planning to move it this session. Our hope is that they do. This, I think, in all of the collective attempts between our coalition and the Department of Education working a similar bill in previous sessions, this might be the 5th time that the Youth Collaborative Bill has been attempted in this iteration. So we want to try to be hopeful. We're still meeting with Ways and Means committee members, and we also are hearing from a lot of Ways and Means committee members that the budget is very tight. But I'm sure everyone else has been hearing something very similar.
Thank you for that. That reminded me of the an email that went out a week or two ago about the summer enrichment bill and essentially the uncertainty of that being funded. I think that may have impacted our RFAs. I'll just share really briefly that folks are just working now. Our RFA, all 3 of our grant applications closed on the 1st, on Monday. In total, I think we've received nearly 500 applications. In community investments alone, there were almost 300 submitted, which close to doubles the most applications we've ever seen in a single cycle. And then Future Ready had a sizable number, I think around 50 or so, maybe 60. And I think in Reengagement, we had somewhere around like 40 or more. So it actually is probably right around a little over 400, I think. But that is a significant increase in grant applications. I haven't really seen content, but my sense from some early conversation is that the lack of the summer enrichment funding might have led to some folks kind of scrambling to look for other resources. And it's hard to say how that's all going to align, but it's just something worth noting. So I know the grants team is working really hard to get geared up, but it's going to be a bigger lift than it's ever been. So I suppose I should say, if you know anyone who'd like to review grants, we are still welcoming folks to volunteer to read grants later this month. I think we've got a pretty good number of people who've expressed an interest, but we're trying to spread the work so it's not too many for anybody. But yeah, so I think the impact of a resource folks counted on not being committed is that the need is still there, and so then programs have to look to other places and do so quickly. So we'll see what that means, but it certainly feels like this is a big change for us. Thank you, Molly. And anything else you wanted to
Thanks, Molly.
say before you go? You're out.
No, it was just great to listen. It was fun to
good.
listen and not have to be responsible for anything.
You're not responsible for anything. Have a wonderful weekend.
Yeah.
Cord, I appreciate that update, and I was wondering if the additional calls for reviewers was because of just the expected load. I think that's a good problem. It is interesting if your theory is correct that the relative lack of summer learning grants is driving folks to our investments. The timing will not necessarily provide a great, I would think, timely resource for programs that are starting up here in June for summer, but that'll be interesting to see. Can we, I know we don't have a grant update on the agenda, so I won't go down the rabbit hole, but do you anticipate that at our upcoming council meeting, we'll be able to see kind of where, what that, total request is, by area and everything? Yeah, great.
Yeah, I think we'll certainly have some information. I'm not sure. So far, compliments to Paul and the rest of the team. They've done an amazing job of just maintaining the timeline. I think when we updated the council last, we were feeling like we were on track to, this is the earliest we had opened an RFA, at least in probably since 2017, if not 2015. Everything has gone really smoothly to this point, but I think it's going to be we have a pretty short timeline for reviews given the volume of reviews. So our hope was to be able in probably late June to have the the list of conditional awards.
Right.
I think that's certainly still feasible, but it's going to just take a lot of work.
Yeah, I was just thinking for our upcoming meeting in a few weeks.
Yeah,
at
early
the very least,
June,
I assume we'll know
where
the
numbers.
requests were. Total requests.
Yeah, I think that analysis would be possible. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. And then I guess this isn't. I guess this is not necessarily a policy and rules issue, but just from a process standpoint, or maybe operational insight. Typically, what is the number of proposals that a single grant reviewer would review? Has that been
it's around 10.
10 for a single reviewer? Okay.
The ideal is 10 to 12.
Mhm.
They're not terribly long, but we just feel like we don't want someone to feel like it's a big commitment. Or more than they've bargained for, and that winds up being. I mean, if you do 10, it's probably about 4 to 6 hours. With
so feasibly, we're looking for like 40 grant reviewers is then the target.
Yeah, I think we've got around 70 right now.
Oh, great. Okay.
But with 70 reviewers, but still with the number of applications, it's still because there's 3 reviewers for each application. So that really means that there's something in the range of like 20 something teams.
Yep.
So I think that winds up, I think the number is somewhere in the range of 20 grants per reviewer right now. I don't know if we're going to get it much lower. I think that one good thing is that there are staff who are reviewing, myself included. And I expect to be on a few different panels in order to help facilitate that, and spread it out a little bit.
Great.
But yeah, it's with 150 to 200 applications, we'd be in great shape, but it is going to be a little bit of a different workload with almost, or maybe more than 400.
Yep.
Oh,
Great.
we're up to 82 reviewers.
Oh, great.
I'm kind of pitching it in every meeting that I'm in. So
yeah, I've been promoting as well as I get those email asks. So that's good. 82
Yeah.
sounds like a good number.
No, and thanks for the nudge on, you know, prepping for the June meeting. I'm pretty sure Paul had planned to do that, but we'll check in and I'll mention.
I'm
it.
sure Paul's just bursting at the seams to share some updates, so it'll be good. Yeah, I think that's all I had. Thanks for, I know that's not on the agenda, but it's good, timely info.
Oh, for sure. Any other thoughts or comments on legislative session or anything related to that? Well, then I will take us to the strategic plan update.
Gordon, this is
yes.
Melissa. Can I interrupt just briefly? I just confirmed that our phone guest is Diana Rojas, who's a
Hey, Diana.
member, but she
Welcome,
can't unmute. So I'm trying on my side of the meeting controls to unmute her. And I'm wondering if it's a setting on her side, maybe, but she's here and we're texting. So
I think that if you're on the phone, you can maybe press try #6, either #6 or *6.
*6.
oh, that's very helpful. I'm just clicking ask to unmute on my side and it's not working, but Diana, text me if you
Yes,
need me to be
*6
your
will do
voice
it.
and I will happily relay anything that you want to contribute. Thank you.
Diana, I'm so excited that you're here. I did actually have a question, which I'll save, but I believe you may be working with the folks at 211, and I would love to talk to you more about that. We were having a conversation about them, and I learned that you've been working with them. So, I will take us on to strategic planning though for now. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, Melissa, you may have seen that I've shared a few of the things. This is the document that we've been sharing in council meetings. You know, I know, Brian, I want to get your comments on this, but essentially, you know, I wanted to today talk about a couple of general logistical things related to how this committee might play a role in strategic planning. I kind of got pulled into the process a little bit after it started in this prior process. So I don't recall, but I believe that there was the committee that was working on the strategic plan seemed to have been an ad hoc committee that was created for that purpose. I don't know if anyone here knows for sure if that's the case or recalls. But it seems like this committee would be the appropriate place for that work to sort of be staged, and for at least some of the work that might lead to full council involvement to happen. And you know, but I felt like it was important for the committee to think about that and decide if that is the committee's opinion, to take on sort of a role in coordinating the strategic plan work from the council end. And then, you know, what that might entail in terms of how does that change the meeting cadence. Obviously, we would probably want to invite other folks from the council who would like to be involved to participate in those meetings. Our new bylaws would permit it to be, you know, larger than just the group of committee members participating. But that's sort of the first question is, are folks comfortable with that? Does that sound like a good idea? And do you have other thoughts on that?
No, I know. I mean, I think, no, Corey, I think I think that sounds good. I'm kind of interested in the committees kind of, and I can't remember if Parsa or Eric were like part of that committee way back
I
when.
was, I don't think this is Eric. I didn't attend every strategic planning meeting, but I attended as many as I could. And I mean, I would defer to our co-chairs for the committee just about other, since we haven't really done as a group that kind of, you know, framing of kind of what our priorities as a subcommittee are. I don't want to presume that hasn't happened. We just haven't done it as a group. So I'll say that first. From my perspective, having been part of the strategic planning process in the previous current iteration, is I think we did a lot of the heavy lifting for the values and vision, and obviously the rebranding with YDO as our model. So I would think that this committee with our adjacency to legislative priorities and rule-making processes, that would be the appropriate kind of add to our strategic plan. I don't think we need to, personally, don't think we need to scrap anything we've done. I think we've got a great foundation. But the difference I see now, or in the near future for strategic planning compared to what we did before, is I think we were kind of resetting our values and vision previously and our narrative. And I feel like we've done that now to where it would make sense to me that this committee would start adding a little more of the deliverables and legislative alignment that would need to happen. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, this is Brian again. And Parsa, I would love to hear your thoughts. And Corday, I think it would be, and this is, I think this is, it doesn't have to be a big deal, sort of somewhat logistical, like, given what Eric said, and maybe we can follow up with our co-chairs. Diana, I know you're listening in, and we can have a conversation. Kind of this, do we set this committee with holding that responsibility? I mean, Cord, I think you're saying this, or do we create some sort of ad hoc work group? I don't know, maybe it doesn't matter. But given what Eric just said, if we can hold this refresh, I'll call it, right? We're not doing some massive new plan, right? Not that it even needs to be massive, this may be not the right word, but we've got the foundational elements set. Now it's driving, and to court, there are a bunch of completed objectives, and that we've done a lot of technical stuff too. But if this committee, and I'll say one other thing, and Cord, if I'm repeating myself, having some of the folks that Cord supervises and the team, which is called the systems change team, right, driving this work forward, it's almost in a project management sense. I think that will get us where we need to be. We may also add in some kind of a facilitator role for when that needs to be brought in for maybe some of the in-person work. So again, Brian, Director, those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to add. I appreciate, what Brian and Eric have contributed so far.
Well, I'll share a couple of other things that might be useful. One is that something we did last time that we're now talking about doing again was hiring outside facilitation. So I think one of the things that I noticed in the last process was, like, I think that Karen Spencer maybe was the if not the chair, the de facto chair of that ad hoc group. And she did like incredible work and like played a pretty massive role in this. But I also feel like that's a lot to ask of someone. And I think that it certainly played to her skills, but I also want to like be thoughtful about how we use folks' time and what we ask of the council. So we've kind of talked about what are the things that we need help with, around, project management generally, around facilitation of discussion, around, whatever sort of product we want to generate with this. So we're thinking about that, like, what can the division do? What would we ask of the council? And then what do we need to bring in additional support to accomplish? And as Brian said, one of the things I'm working with my team on is like really, we're, it's essentially Bill Hansel, Abraham Magana, and Sally Deck, who is the newest person on our team who joined to lead the Future Ready work. But each of them has some pretty unique skills and interests that I think will be really valuable to this. And so as we're talking as a team, I've planted the seed that I think that we as a group could provide a lot of different types of support to this. So it's not just one staff person at YDD that's trying to sort of keep track of everything, but also are there some areas of focus that they can contribute to. So we're thinking that through on our end is how we involve staff. And I think all staff, would have opportunities to contribute, but we want to think about how we as a team can really support this work.
Could you, Cord or Brian, provide a refresher on the time frame that we're thinking about for this? I believe, Brian, at the last full council meeting, you mentioned that just because of the governor's kind of expectations for plans, like essentially the plan that we're looking at now is what we've submitted for the foreseeable future. So, I mean, what are we actually talking about in terms of both any external, or rather, governor's expectations versus just staff's recommendation for when we need a refresh in place?
Yeah, I'll try to do my best and Cord to help fill in. Again, Brian Detman, YDD director. I should look back because I think the expectation around a strategic plan, I think they've shifted it, and Cord, maybe you and I can dig up the documents, I think to the end of the calendar year. I think it was, they had talked initially about a June 30, July 1 date, and I think it may have shifted to the end of the year. So just keeping that in mind, we can double check if I'm correct, or I might, because I might not be. But I think if it was going to be the end of the biennium, June 30, we'd essentially say, hey, we've got this plan, we've been operating. There are some questions that need to be answered, and maybe Cord just can speak to that sort of we'd need to take our plan and make sure that specific elements are that were asked for kind of in the form of outline would be provided, which again, we'd use our existing plan as a basis. But I think our general timeline and a big factor in all of this for me is, and I'm working on this and have some folks in mind, but new members of the council. So I did, because of our community conversations, identified a few people at our meetings, encouraging you all to send me names or ideas if you have them. But let's just say by fall or late summer, fall, I'd love to have added, who knows, 3 to 7 or 8 people, and then could really see kind of like a late fall, early winter. It might ultimately be like a kind of a kickoff in December, early December, which I know is, holidays, not maybe the best time, but maybe some kind of kickoff. But having some new members on board and then really diving in on the planning, Eric, I think makes
that resonates now from what we spoke about it last quarter. I appreciate that reminder. And there are also some of us like myself that are terming off in 2024. So there will be a changing of the guard to some extent. So basically, we're thinking some sort of actual convening, whether that's in person, virtual, synchronous or not, between our fall and our winter quarterly meetings.
I think that, Eric, I think that's realistic, right? Yeah. And maybe if it's a retreat or a multi-day thing, post-September, or somewhere maybe as late as, when's our winter meeting? I think March, technically. Is it February, March? Probably March.
Oh, right.
So, but there's a December meeting in there as well. But with the holidays, we want to be sensitive. But again, I don't think it's, as I said, as much of a lift. So maybe it's kind of a target in my mind. Maybe if we work at it, we can get a draft version by the March meeting. So those are just some off the top of my head dates.
Well, I will share the governor's expectation dates because they might influence us a little bit. So there's 2 things that are going on. One is that there is a governor's expectation related to strategic plans from agencies. Among the various agency expectations, a updated strategic plan is one. There's also an expectation around a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan, which can be embedded into the strategic plan or could be a standalone piece. There's a deadline around that DEI plan to be submitted by June 1. If it were embedded into a strategic plan that was less than 24 months old, that strategic plan could be submitted. But our strategic plan is now, I believe, possibly more than 24 months old, although I should double check. So it's kind of right on the edge. If we are in that situation, then we could submit a plan to plan, which they're supposed to provide a template for, where we would sort of say, here's our plan for how we're going to do the DEI plan. Back to strategic plans, for agencies with a strategic plan that is less than 36 months old, they would like it submitted by December 31st, the end of the year, 2023. Although it has to be submitted in a sort of specified format. If we had an older strategic plan, then we would have a longer deadline, but it's a bit of a wonky structure, but essentially we would have to have something, at least, a refreshed in maybe a bare bones way plan that we would be able to provide to the governor's office by the end of the year, unless perhaps they would give us an extension, which my sense is that they've been pretty receptive to conversation with individual agencies about unique needs and circumstances. I think if we came forward and say, we have a very set structured process that we're going to go through and it's going to be complete in the spring, that would probably be well received if we were to go in well in advance of the deadline and explain what we were trying to do. But those are kind of the moving parts with the governor's office. And, I think that we probably want to at least talk with them about how what we're trying to do would align with that and whether there's some flexibility. But, that's I'm kind of looking at the governor's expectation stuff. That's what it says.
Thanks, Corey. That's helpful. And you said that a diversity, equity, inclusion plan needs to be submitted by June 1st, like in 3 weeks.
In 3 weeks, or we can submit a plan to plan if there's some that. So if we were to embed it into our strategic plan, then we could submit something saying we're going to do this as part of our strategic planning, and then it could be aligned.
I see. Yeah, and potentially part of our, I don't want to be presumptuous, but potentially what Brian was just talking about our strategies for engaging new council members could be part of that strategic, that diversity, equity, inclusion plan. Through some other board, work that I'm involved with, that's typically where the rubber's hitting the road, is like the composition of your board or your council, how it represents, reflects the communities you serve. Certainly we have talked about our, looking at it on my screen right now, are some of our commitments to equity and anti-racism work. And I think speaking to some of the strategy and even statutory changes we've attempted to implement in terms of some targeted tribal, sovereign tribal kind of outreach and efforts and funding, and then strategies about the diversity of our council. I would feel comfortable. Again, I'll defer to Diana and to Zan, but I would feel comfortable saying that we either could buy ourselves some time and say that will be happening prior to our launch of the next strategic plan in the fall, winter. Or to your point, Cord, if by June 1st we just need to say we plan to have a plan, then I'll defer to you all to what the politics and nuance of that are.
Well, there's another sort of twist, which is that these are agency expectations, but YDD is pretty unique in that we are independent in many respects, but dependent on the Department of Education in some pretty critical ones. So, for example, like there's an expectation around IT processes and a plan for how agencies will manage their IT work, and that is not in our purview. Like we're gonna rely on ODE for that piece. With diversity, equity, and inclusion plan, I think there are definitely things that we can do within YDD and things we can do for the council, but our HR is actually ODE. And so where a DEI plan interacts with hiring practices in HR, we have to kind of figure out what that would look like. And there have been a few pieces with this where I'm not totally clear on whether we are covered under ODE doing something, but there are things where we are really actively, like, we want to say this is the YDD piece. Like, we're going to be very proactive about saying we have our own strategic plan. So there are things that I think make sense for us to sort of be out front in, but things that are not really among the expectations, not really things that we can take on. So that's another thing we have to navigate, is like, what exactly do we YDD have to do as an agency? And then what do we need to do for the council? So that's, I mean, the deadlines are sort of sneaking up on us a bit, to be honest. Because I was realizing that, I mean, I think I've had this on my list and meant to talk to Brian about it this week. I was like, ODE has an equity strategic plan, but does that, I mean, in theory applies to us. But does that satisfy the requirement, or do we need to go further? And I do think having the council, the equity statement and whatnot is really valuable. And I think we could also reference these things as guiding our work around our strategic plan. But yeah, there's some ambiguity there.
And clearly we want to get the Equity and Disparity Committee involved in that work, as well as this, Policy, Rules, and Research Committee. So, well, I know we're at or past time, so I won't belabor it. I think I'm the only one asking questions, unless Diana's sent anything into you, Melissa. So I would say, as the remaining council member with a microphone, that let's if a conversation could happen with Stan and Diana as our co-chairs about whether and how the committee will engage in both the DEI report and the strategic planning. I would say, from my perspective, it makes good sense, and it'd be nice to maybe have a at least to provide a quick soundbite or update at the upcoming council meeting of whether this committee will be stepping into that, or whether we will have, as we did before, a standalone, work group. Could you say one point of clarification, Cord? What is the limitation, or is there a limitation in having more council members who may wish to join in specifically some strategic planning conversations? Like, if this committee was to say that's going to be our business when we meet quarterly or more frequently, there's a cap, is what I'm understanding, in the number of members. No, there is no cap. Okay.
No, there's not. I think what we did is actually made it explicitly possible for committees to include folks who are not regular committee members.
Okay.
Other council members can attend, and even non-council members could be involved.
I must have misheard you then. So effectively, if we were to say this committee will provide the framework and steer, but it's open to any that want to contribute, that would be okay. Great. I think that's wonderful. I would for the record, just say I think that that's a good idea, and I would be interested in hearing what Zan and Diana have to say about that. Is it appropriate to move us forward? I don't know if there is any public comment. I don't know if there's any public. Okay.
No public attending at this time. Thanks.
Okay. Well, thank you, staff, for all the great work and updates, and for all the things that I know are happening behind the scenes with the grant reviewing and all of the associated communications and outreach. Your work is definitely appreciated. Is there any other business or updates or items we need to put on the record here?
None here.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Brian. I see that we'll bring this to the executive committee as well. Thank you. Great. Well, if there is nothing else, I will go ahead and adjourn the Policy, Rules, and Research Committee at 1:34.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Diana.
Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Diana.
Bye, y'all. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, you too.
You too.